Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing well today. This time we are going to be talking about Jaws on the NES. This is one of those games that LJN published, but it doesn't really feel like an LJN game because it's actually pretty playable and somewhat enjoyable. It feels like a prototype for an RPG or something like that. You sail around on like an overworld map in a little sailboat, and then occasionally you have a random encounter where it says you hit something, which, sure, why not? You then come to these little battle screens where you're fighting off stingrays, jellyfish, baby sharks, and jaws. There are also bonus levels where you are dropping bombs on jellyfish. I'm not sure what jellyfish did to the developers of this game. Like, maybe they got stung by one when they were a kid. But it feels a little weird that you're just constantly going after them. And yes, I'm aware that jellyfish are actually dangerous and blah 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 blah. You can encounter Jaws really early in this game, and sometimes it's a little overwhelming because you are not powered up enough to actually fight him. What you have to do is collect a bunch of conch shells, and then you can go to one of the two different ports in this world in order to power up your boat, or power up your attacks. You also get different items from these ports as well, so I guess it kind of works out. And there's a little mini submarine that you can sometimes get, which doesn't really help, at least in my opinion. I guess it makes you stronger, but it doesn't really feel like it. Some of the items that you get in order to help you don't really feel like they actually help you. Like, there's this one little radar thing that you get that's supposed to tell you where Jaws is, but it's pretty obvious where he is. I haven't been able to figure out what it's supposed to do, which is a little strange. You also can collect crabs and what are supposed to be starfish, but don't look like starfish. And those give you points, which apparently you need, but I'm not really sure why. This was at an odd point where some games were still all high score and others had like a set goal. It was like they didn't really know exactly what they were doing. Let's get into some of the visuals of the game really quick. This is kind of a boring game from a visual standpoint. The overworld is not all that interesting. You have two ports that you can go to, and then a spot where the submarine occasionally shows up. The battle scenes really seem like it really only seems like there are two, where you have a shallow water one and a deep water one. They're not super interesting, and it feels a little bit like a single-screen arcade game when you get into those. There's not really a special scene for when you encounter Jaws in this. There is when you actually get to the end of the game to meet him. But it's kind of weird when it gets to that. Also, the bonus screens are not super interesting either. However, the pixel art is pretty good, especially when you get to the cutscenes and it shows your boat pulling into places or something along those lines. It looks pretty great in that spots. Also, the final scene when you do fight Jaws, that looks pretty good too. It can be a little hard to line up properly in order to actually hit Jaws, but it still looks pretty good. It's one of those weird things where the gameplay is kind of interesting at first, but gets really old. Visually, it's pretty repetitive, but in some cases, it looks pretty good. It's kind of a weird thing, at least for me. Let's talk a little bit about some of my memories of the game. This is one of those games that I never owned growing up. It was a usual rental or just something that we played over at a friend's house or one of the neighbors' houses whenever we would go over there. This is a a really weird game because I had never seen Jaws before. I had never really seen the movie, and then played the game, and then didn't really have any interest in seeing the movie after that. It was very weird. I don't know. This game is just... It's very strange. It's one of the many games that LJN tried to publish. I don't know. It's got a lot of strange things going on with it, which should work very well for an NES game, but it's just such a bizarre game, and it's made just very strangely. A lot of things in it just don't make a whole lot of sense. There's stuff that you wouldn't really know when you're playing it. And it's just one of those games that gets a lot of flack, and for the most part kind of deserves it. I remember as a kid having no idea what I was doing when I was playing it. And then when I was collecting games later on in life, I picked it up because it was one of the games I remembered when I was a kid. And then playing it again and thinking, yeah, I still don't really know what I'm supposed to do. And even after realizing what I was supposed to do, not really enjoying it as much as I probably should have or could have enjoyed it. It is a well-made game for the most part. It's just one of those very bizarre LJN games that doesn't really feel like it's totally thought out, in all honesty. It's a very confusing game that has quite a few memories tied up in it for me, but none of them are really about the game. They're all about just playing it with my friends and kind of laughing at the game or trying to figure out what we were supposed to do. It's a very, very weird game. Not a good game, but somewhat enjoyable. Jaws is a pretty mediocre game. It sits in a weird spot genre-wise where it's not really a role-playing game, it's not really a single-screen arcade game, and it's not exactly an adventure game. It's one of the weird hybrids where the developers who made LJN games sort of mashed some stuff together and experimented a little bit. That seems to be what most LJN games are. They're kind of experiments to see exactly what the developers could do, and they just happen to have a license attached to them. At least that's the way most of them feel to me. I do have a few good memories of playing this game, but most of those aren't really about the game. They're just with playing with my friends and whatnot. So that's going to wrap things up. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I will talk to you all later. Bye.